Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Natalia Springer. I work in the small business office, and I am the restaurant assistant. Joined by us, we have Danny Green and Kathleen Joyce of licensing, and Carolina Perez, who will be here for interpretation. If you need any interpretation services or guidance, please let us know. Okay. Shoot. We ask that everyone remain muted. If you do have any questions, there will be availability for that at the end of this. Please feel free throughout the presentation to drop all of your questions in the Q&A box, and we will be able to answer them. If you do need interpretation, there is a little active button here where you can go into that room and Caroline will be able to assist you. And this kind of says the same thing. Danny, are you ready to go?
Why not? Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalia. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. My name is Danny Green. I am the executive secretary and the attorney for the licensing board. Before we get into kind of the content of today's presentation about liquor licenses, just a bit of an overview about who the licensing board is, what the licensing board does. The licensing board is a 3-member board appointed by the mayor. We're very lucky the chair, Kathleen Joyce, is with us today, and we'll be talking in a little bit about exactly what the board is looking for in reviewing liquor license applications. Under the board's purview are a number of different business types. Most relevant for today's conversation are alcoholic beverage licenses. That includes both licenses to sell alcoholic beverages on premise, so that is your restaurants, clubs, bars, and also package stores and liquor stores where you buy alcohol to be consumed off premise. Before I go any further, the theme that you'll hear from today's presentation is that in applying for a liquor license, there are a lot of steps in the process, and we really want to do everything we can to help folks through those steps. So a really great resource for anybody who is looking to apply for a liquor license is our website, which is boston.gov/licensing. On that website, you will find recordings from previous webinars like this one that we've done. You will find a link to our bi-weekly office hours where you can get support on your application. You will find an FAQ page about the license process in 10 languages. You will also find a guide on how to apply for a liquor license in 12 steps. So please do visit our website and please do ask us any questions as you go through the process. All right, next slide, please. Cool. So we're here to talk about liquor licenses. Broadly, liquor licenses in Massachusetts can be broken down into 2 main categories. Those 2 main categories are, as I said previously, liquor licenses for on-premise establishments and off-premise establishments. Your on-premise is anywhere where you buy a drink and you drink it the same place you buy it. You sit down at a restaurant, at a bar, at a club, and you drink your drink immediately. Off-premise is anywhere where you buy an alcoholic beverage and you drink it somewhere else. Your package store, a convenience store, liquor store. Both types of licenses have a hard quota that is set by the state. The number of licenses that the city can issue is set by the state. Any additional license over the number that is issued by the state, we have to go to the state and ask for more. So if you've heard or read news stories about liquor licenses costing $600,000 or some huge number like that, that's because of the quota. That's because we've been at our quota. And really the only way for most businesses to get a liquor license would be to buy one on the secondary market for whatever market value would be, which recently has been trending towards $600,000. So why we're here today and why there's a big opportunity is just recently this year, for the first time in a decade, the city was able to get from the state 225 new liquor licenses to be issued over the next 3 years. These are licenses that will not cost $600,000, that are not purchased on the open market. These are licenses that can be obtained directly from the city, from the licensing board. So thank you for going to this slide. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here on this slide. Here is what is in the legislation that Mayor Wu, that the City Council, that the legislature, and that Governor Healy were able to sign into law in September of this year. Great, awesome, thank you. So 225 licenses total to be given out over the next 3 years. The largest, the lion's share, the kind of biggest bucket of licenses that have been made available are geographically restricted licenses, specifically zip code restricted licenses. Of the 225 licenses now available, 195 of them are earmarked for specific zip codes in the city. And in a minute after I'm done with this slide, you'll see a map of actually where those are. But broadly, these zip codes represent the neighborhoods of Charlestown, Dorchester, East Boston, Hyde Park, Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, Roslindale, Roxbury, the South End, and West Roxbury. So if you're looking to open a business or expand your business to include alcohol sales in one of these neighborhoods or one of these zip codes, there are now licenses available that are earmarked specifically for those zip codes. The way these are going to be distributed is 5 per year per zip code, 15 total per zip code because they're given out over 3 years. Broken down even further than that, of those 5 per year, 3 are for all alcoholic beverages licenses that allows you to sell any alcohol, beer, wine, plus hard alcohol, your vodka, tequila, rum, anything like that. And 2 that are just for beer and wine. In addition to the zip code restricted licenses, there are also 3 licenses available just for the Oak Square section of the Brighton neighborhood. For all of these geographically restricted licenses, so that's the 195 zip code plus the Oak Square licenses, these are non-transferable, which means that when the business closes or moves, that license comes back to the board. You cannot sell it. You cannot give it to someone else. It comes back to the board to be reissued back to that same zip code. That keeps businesses in the neighborhoods where there's a need for these businesses. And it also means that people trying to open businesses with alcohol in these zip codes will not have to pay $600,000 to get a liquor license. It lowers the barrier to entry and keeps businesses in our neighborhoods. We think this is all a net positive. One thing to be aware of for these geographically restricted licenses, so the zip code licenses and the Oak Square licenses, there is a requirement that these businesses prepare food on premise. That means that you have to have both a food service permit from Inspectional Services Department and a common victualler license from us at the licensing board. So all of these zip code and Oak Square restricted licenses are intended to go to restaurants or other types of businesses where food is prepared on site. In addition to the zip code and Oak Square licenses, there are also 15 licenses that are earmarked for community spaces anywhere in the city. Community spaces are defined pretty broadly, but can include outdoor spaces, nonprofit organizations, or small theaters with under 750 seats. Again, these can go anywhere in the city. These do not have to prepare food on site, but these are also non-transferable. These cannot be sold on the open market. These will never cost $600,000. And if a business that receives a community space license goes out of business or moves, again, similarly, that license comes back to the board to be reissued to another qualifying community space, nonprofit, small theater, outdoor space. The final category of licenses is, and I talked about the quota earlier, for the first time in more than a decade, 12 all alcohol licenses have been added to our quota. Those can go anywhere in the city, and those actually can be transferred or sold in the open market. They don't have to return to the board when the business closes. So we go to the next slide, please. Here's a map. This map shows you everywhere that the geographic restricted licenses, which is the vast majority of the new licenses we got, the shaded areas everywhere in the city where these licenses can be issued over the next 3 years. The only thing that's missing is a tiny little dot in Oak Square in Brighton. Otherwise, you see this covers the majority of the city. What's missing is really the downtown core, Seaport, South Boston, Back Bay, Allston, Brighton. Otherwise, these really are opportunities for the majority of our neighborhoods to enter the marketplace, get a liquor license without the barrier of having to buy one on the open market. And also, please, just to echo Natalia, I know it's a lot of information going on here. If you do have questions, please do type them into the Q&A, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions folks have as they're going through this. We'll make sure we get to them at the end. All right, next slide, please. Cool. So what does an application actually look like? Applications are really, it's a lot of paperwork and it's a lot of meetings. So as a local licensing authority in Massachusetts, the Boston Licensing Board has to use the standard state ABCC, or Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, application process. On the left-hand side of your screen is all of the documents that make up a completed application. That includes the ABCC application. A link to that is on our website. The monetary transmittal form is just a fancy word for the first page of the ABCC application. It's where you check off the transaction, which is new application. You also need to submit to us your business structure documents that you're going to get from the Secretary of State's office. Most commonly, we see businesses applying as a corporation, as an LLC, or as a sole proprietor. Either way, we need to make sure that whoever you are disclosing as having an interest in this license also has been disclosed to the state as someone who has an interest in the business applying for the license. We also need to make sure that you have the right to occupy the space that you're applying for a license at. Licenses are tied to a specific premise. A question that we've been getting a lot in sessions like this is, do I need to have a space already identified before I apply for a license? The short answer is yes. Yes, you do. The way that that is established can be one of three ways. If you happen to own the space, great, send us your deed. That is the proof that you are authorized to use the space. If you are renting, great, send us your lease. If you are in talks with a landlord and you haven't signed a lease yet, but you will sign a lease if you get a license, you can apply with a letter of intent. If you have a letter of intent that is signed by you and your landlord, that is enough for the purposes of applying for this license. But yes, you do need to have a space identified and have some proof that you have the authority to occupy the space when you apply for the license. The next thing is anybody who is either a named manager of record, an officer or director, or has any financial or beneficial interest in the license has to submit a Corey authorization form. We at the city, we do not run Corys. We don't run the background checks, but the state does. That is state law. So you do need to make sure that you submit Corey authorization forms for all those folks who need them. There is also a section on the application where you need to disclose if there isn't a criminal record. I just want to say up front, having a criminal record does not prohibit you from holding a liquor license unless it is a narcotics conviction. Anything else can and should be disclosed and can be mitigated. The worst thing you could do is to not disclose a criminal record, and then when the state does a background check, they turn out that you actually do have one. So make sure that you are being honest and forthright throughout the application process, because it will come up during the process. Next thing you'll need to submit is your manager of record, who is the person who is kind of designated as the kind of day-to-day point person managing the licensed premise, managing the food and beverage program, and the person who the board can call on if there are any emergencies or is responsible for any violations. That person does have to be a US citizen. That is state law. That's not something that we can change or waive. So proof of citizenship of the manager of record is required in your application. The final two things are the floor plan. That can be just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper showing us what your space looks like, where alcohol is being served, where people sit, where your exits and entrances and bathrooms are, and where any alcohol is being stored. And then lastly, entity vote is just a piece of paper that's in the application, proving that the person submitting the application has the right to do so. The last two things are things that we at the board will help you with. All liquor license applications in Massachusetts have to be advertised in a newspaper. So we will actually write the advertisement for you and help you place it in the Boston Herald. We've negotiated a rate with them, so that's why you'll see on the right-hand side a fee to the Boston Herald. And then once your ad runs and before your hearing with the board, you'll have to notify your abutters in writing that you're having a hearing and you're applying for a liquor license. Again, we will help you with that. We'll help you figure out who your abutters are. So you don't need to worry about those last two things at the outset. So I've said a few times that these new licenses will not cost $600,000. So the question is, what will they cost, right? So the upfront costs are pretty low. The costs to apply for a liquor license are as follows. There's a $200 fee that goes straight to the ABCC. That's your application fee. There's a $100 fee that comes to us at the licensing board. That is your hearing fee. And then there's a $170 fee to the Boston Herald. So once you have all of your documents in, once we get your fees, and the last piece is your community process run by the Office of Neighborhood Services. Once those three things are done, you can be scheduled for a hearing with the licensing board. Again, this is a lot here. So when you submit your application, staff here at the board are going to review your application and send you a status update within 2 or 3 days, letting you know exactly what needs to be worked on, what isn't 100% correct. We will identify for you anything that's missing or needs work before you get your way to a hearing. So we'll help you through it because we know it is a lot. All right, next slide, please. All right, so Kathleen's going to talk in a minute about what happens at your hearing. I'm just going to finish up by saying, let's say everything goes well at your hearing and the board grants you a new license and there happens to be one available at that time. What we're going to do is send your application up to the ABCC. So the process starts with the licensing board, but then it goes up to the state for investigation and final approval. Once a license application is at the ABCC, they can do one of three things. They could just approve it outright. They could reject it, which is very rare. I don't know that I've seen just a flat out rejection in the 3 years that I've been with the board. The ABCC really tries to work with applicants to get to an approval. The third thing, which is how we get to an approval, is what's called return no action. That's what happens when, maybe there's pieces missing in the application. Maybe in the ABCC's investigation, there's some folks who weren't disclosed who should have been, or the premise doesn't look exactly like it was in the application. For whatever reason, there might be more information needed. They will send a report with a return no action to both you, the applicant, and us at the board. And we will work with you to make sure you get everything back up to the ABCC so we can get to an approval. Once we get the approval from the ABCC, we can issue your license. You can have a license in hand and start selling alcohol once we get three final things from you. Those are a certificate of inspection from the Inspectional Services Department and a fire assembly permit from the fire department if your capacity is 50 or more. These are really life safety issues. We want to make sure that any space we're licensing for alcohol also has been checked by the inspection authorities to make sure that it's safe. And then finally, proof of liquor liability insurance. Any premise that serves alcohol has to carry liquor liability insurance. That's state law. I think that's it for me. Can I see the next slide? Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Chair of the Boston Licensing Board, Kathleen Joyce, to talk about public need and what the board is actually looking for in a successful application.
Thank you, Danny. Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Joyce. I'm Chair of the Boston Licensing Board. I'm happy to be joining you all today. And as Danny outlined earlier, the steps that are necessary to have a public hearing, I want to talk about what the board looks at and what kind of questions you can expect at the public hearing. So you'll often hear us talk about public need. It's a phrase that you'll hear us ask license applicants at every single hearing. And it's the legal standard that the licensing authorities all through Massachusetts use to determine the suitability of an alcohol license in a particular location. Public need for a license in Charlestown might be different than the public need for a license in Roxbury. So we use different factors to determine what public need is based on a variety of things. Those factors include the number, the number of pre-existing licenses in the area, whether or not we believe, that means whether or not we believe this neighborhood could sustain another alcohol license with this type of concept, whether the proposed license is unique in the area, whether it will have impacts on traffic and noise, whether there's public support and public opposition, and the reputation, character, and fitness of the applicant. So I want to just, before we move on to the next slide, just distinguish between public support and public need. Just because there's public support for an application, it doesn't necessarily translate to public need. Public support or public opposition is one of the many factors we use to determine the overall public need of a particular license application. The next slide. Back to additional considerations. So we will also consider The licensing board will be considering all completed applications that we receive by December 6th as one group. To evaluate these applications, the licensing board will consider an applicant's core business proposal and how this license will advance the city's goals to support neighborhood economic development and add to our city's diverse and vibrant culture, including how the license would enable the applicant to enhance the cultural and economic activity of the neighborhood, how the license would create new businesses and economic opportunity across our diverse communities, how the license would support wealth generation for less resourced entrepreneurs, and how it would promote emerging and diverse businesses and communities to advance the city's commercial offerings. The next slide. So, as you've probably heard by now, due to the strong levels of interest in all categories of licenses, whether it be beer and wine or all alcohol, the board will review a completed application in batches. Applications for this first round of new licenses need to be submitted to our office by 11:59 on Friday, December 6, 2024. We will hold our next round of review sometime in the spring 2025. The exact date has not been determined yet. We will continue to schedule hearings on a rolling basis, but we're going to defer decisions on any application award until all applicants in a given round have been heard and received. A completed application must include all required forms in any community process required by the Office of Neighborhood Services, excuse me, which generally means a public meeting to discuss the proposal with neighbors. So if you are interested in applying either for this round, although the deadline is fast approaching, or the next round, you should really reach out to the Office of Neighborhood Services and get their guidance as to what the community process should look like. It's different for every neighborhood. It's determined by neighborhood services. The next slide. So we have been holding liquor license application office hours bi-weekly on Wednesdays from 3 to 5. Danny and other members of my team will take you one by one into a Zoom room, and we will answer specific questions you have about your application. They can be simple questions about what does this form mean here, or what are they looking for from me in this form, or very general questions about, what can I expect at my community meeting? What can I expect at the public hearing? So Danny and Wendy on my team, as well as others, can pitch in and help you. If you can't make the office hours, give us a call. We answer our messages, we answer our emails, and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Next slide. So Natalia, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Let me. So small business support. The Office of Small Business is here to essentially help provide support during, before, and especially after the liquor license applications process. We do have technical assistance that is available in the following areas. There's business planning and strategy. We have architectural, rendering support, marketing and social media, website development, legal support, and restaurant and food and industry support. We do have additional resources as well. We also have a program where we help with signage for new and existing businesses. So please never hesitate to reach out for us for any type of assistance with that as well. We also, likewise to licensing board, we love walk-ins. We're willing to meet virtually or in person. We can come out to you. We do have neighborhood business managers that come out to the neighborhoods as well. And then for technical assistance, there's a series of ways that you can get in touch. I will be leaving my email in the chat. So if you do need to get in touch or ask me any additional questions, or if you would like the slides from today, feel free to reach out. And thank you all for coming. I can't get back to webinar. So we do have some questions. The first being, how much are the new unrestricted transferable on-premise licenses?
Yeah, so covered that in an earlier slide, but if you are applying for a new license, not one that you're buying on the open market, but a new license from the city, the cost will just be the $200 application fee to the state, the $100 hearing fee to the city, and the $170 advertising fee to the Boston Herald. If you are awarded a license, then you will pay an annual renewal fee, which is dependent on the type of license you get and your capacity, because there is a per seat capacity fee as well. Annual renewal fees typically run between around $2,000 to $3,000 a year, but that was the full upfront costs.
All right. Second, we have what protocol must be followed for a private social club to obtain a license to serve alcohol?
So a private social club absolutely can apply. The process to apply is the same. It's the same application process. It's the same community meeting process. It's the same presentation before the board. And the board will still have to look at the public need for this private club to have a license. There is a category of license when you are filling out the application called club. That means that the only folks who are allowed in the space are members of the club and their guests. So that is a whole category of license. Again, the question for the board will be, is the public served, and is the public need filled and met the highest by a license awarded to this social club? But you're certainly welcome to apply, and the board will give it full weight.
All right, so we have a concern here. Citizenship, the question is citizenship, I believe the requirement changed with the governor signing the economic development bill yesterday, 11/20. Does this new development change the citizenship policy for the licenses?
I think oh, go ahead, Kathleen.
I was just gonna say, it's like a 320-page bill that we haven't yet reviewed, but I saw the comment in the chat and I'm looking at it right now. Doing a quick word search, I don't see it, but we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, so yeah, you're a day ahead of us. If in fact that's true, that's actually that's great news. And we'll confer with the ABCC to basically see if there's any guidance about what we do and do not need to require, since we follow their application process. But thanks for the heads up on that, Brendan.
Okay, and then quick digression. Julia is asking, from my understanding, Danny, I think we spoke about this, it is too late to apply by the 12/6 date.
So I wouldn't say that necessarily, right? If you can get a completed application in and your community process is done by December 6th, great. Regardless of whether your application is complete and done by December 6th, applications are welcome at any time. We never turn off the portal to accept applications, and we never stop holding hearings. In fact, we are legally required to hold a hearing within 30 days of a completed application. So even if it's not in by December 6th, you can still apply anytime. We will still hold a hearing anytime. The only kind of nuance is if you're not in by December 6th, the board will likely just defer voting on your application until the next kind of batch, which, as Kathleen said, will be sometime in the spring.
Okay. Will these new licenses affect the value of existing transferable licenses, for example, a liquor license in downtown?
We don't think so. So back in 2014 was the last time a whole bunch of new licenses entered the market. And in fact, the kind of the value of transferable licenses only continued to go up. The only time we ever saw a brief dip was at the very beginning of COVID, when a whole bunch of places were shutting down. But ever since then, it's been an upward trajectory. In fact, there has been no correlation or evidence that additional licenses on the market, especially when there's only 12 transferables being added, would dilute the value. But remains to be seen. I'm not an economist, but we haven't seen that in prior experience.
All right. Do I need a business before I apply for a new license?
Yeah, great question. So you need to apply under some sort of business structure, right? So if you are applying as a sole proprietor, that's great. You'll still need, a DBA, doing business as certificate from the city clerk's office. Otherwise, most folks do apply either as an LLC or a corporation, some business entity. And that's somewhere where you might want kind of business advice, either from small business or from an attorney who specializes this on how to advise you on how to organize. That's not something that we would advise you on, but you would need that kind of structure settled before you apply.
All right. It looks like we have two more. Once approved, is there a time limit we must meet for opening?
So technically, any license that is not used for more than 6 months, the board can hold a hearing for the non-use of that license. So there are a lot of folks who do apply for licenses while, let's say, a building is still under construction, and we know that it's not going to be ready for, you know, a while after the license is actually granted. We just ask that the licensee keep in contact with the board, keep us apprised of the status, make sure we know things are moving along, that you are planning to put that license to use, right? The goal of the board is for these licenses to be put to good use and good and productive use, and not just kind of sitting vacant. So we would like to remain in contact, and if we see that things aren't moving along quickly, you know, the board always reserves the right to kind of question that, hold a hearing, and potentially move things along if it's really not being used. Kathleen, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think I covered it.
All right. Just to clarify, there can be a hearing after we apply, and then the board will review in the spring for the next batch of applications.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if your application is in after December 6th, we're gonna hold a hearing anytime, but that application will be considered in the next round of review, which would be in the spring.
Okay. For everyone asking for the slide decks, yes, I will be sending them out to everyone. And then lastly, there's an inquiry about, will there be licenses issued to the north end?
So the legislation is very specific about where some of the majority of these licenses will go. And you will see the north end is not one of those places, which means there are no licenses in this legislation that are earmarked for the north end, which means the possibilities for a restaurant in the north end are, you know, the same as anyone trying to open a restaurant in any other part of the city. I can't give a number. It all depends on the board's determination of where a license, you know, most highly meets the public need. So again, it's not a specific number. It's really up to the board to determine where licenses are best put to the best need throughout the entire city.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to add?
Oh, I see a question in the chat from Kylie Grant. If applied for in December and approved, what is the timeline for receiving it? Great. Yep. So let's say your application is in before December 6th. Board holds a hearing on it and then votes. Whenever the vote for those December 6th applications will probably be in January. The ones that are approved will be sent to the ABCC. The timeline for receiving your license honestly depends on the ABCC review and approval process. That is not something that we control. If everything goes well, there's no need for, you know, a lot of back and forth or investigation from the ABCC. We typically see those turned around in 6 to 8 weeks. However, that can stretch out to several months if there are any deficiencies in the application or there's any investigation that's needed. Once the ABCC approval comes back, license can be in hand once we get those last remaining documents that I talked about earlier, your certificate of inspection, your fire assembly permit, and your liquor liability insurance.
All right. So there is a question, just some confusion on the lease. If granted a license and for some reason the lease falls through, will that affect the license?
Yeah, so if the board comes to know that the person, the entity on the license no longer has a legal right to that space, then you wouldn't have a right to that license at that space anymore. That would probably be an informational hearing to figure out what is the legal occupancy of that space, could potentially, you know, result in suspension or revocation of the license to kind of figure that out. So you can't operate a license in a space that you're not authorized to be in.
All right. The city just approved several licenses in the North End within the past month. I thought there was no license for North End. Can you elaborate?
So, Liza, the board held several hearings for license applications in the North End within the past month. The board has not approved any new license applications anywhere in the city within the past month. The board is holding on deliberating all of those new license applications until all of this batch of applications are in after December 6th. So there were hearings for them, as we're legally required to do, but no decisions have been made. Licenses in the North End have not been approved in the past month.
All right. Do you have any other questions? I don't see any. Is there a limit on how many stores can be opened?
Oh, about package stores, there is, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but for restaurants, if you're talking about on-premise licenses, there is not a limit. There is a limit on package stores. I can get that to you, but I don't have it off the top of my head at the moment.
Okay. Does BPDA need to sign off?
Hmm?
That is one of the questions. BPDA, do they need to sign off?
If,
On
yeah,
what?
if you're referring to the city's planning department, formerly known as the BPDA, it would only be if you're planning on opening on one of their owned properties, and they would have to sign off as landlord. But no, you don't have to go to planning for this.
All right. Danny, we have a question about mobile business and traveling bartending.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. So, the short answer is no, that would not be appropriate for one of these annual licenses. Annual alcoholic beverages licenses are tied to brick and mortar premises. So we could not license your mobile business. However, there is a category of license that is issued directly from the state that is called a 12C caterer's license that would allow you to cater private events anywhere in the state with your mobile bartending business. We would not be able to license, the city would not be able to license your mobile bartending business. But if you have more questions, we might want to talk offline because you could be eligible for special one-day licenses if you are doing mobile bartending on like a special event basis. So the answer is no, but maybe we want to talk offline about specifically what you're looking to do.
All right. Can the public view upcoming hearing schedules?
Yep. All of our hearings are posted to the city's website, both boston.gov/licensing and also the city's public notice website, well in advance of the hearings, at least 48 hours ahead. We usually like to put them up a week in advance. They're usually not available too long before then because we don't always know what's on the hearings before then because applications are pretty static and we like to schedule things as soon as they are complete. So check our website. The hearing schedule is up there. You will always know when hearings are coming up, and the actual agenda for each hearing typically will be up there a week before.
All right. Can a corporation with a member that has narcotic convictions obtain a license?
That person would not be able to have an interest in that license.
All right.
That's the short answer.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Give it a minute. Your thoughts?
Oh, and I do have an answer on the number of package stores. So someone asked about holding how many stores can you own? The answer is no corporation, association, or any other combination of persons. So basically no entity can hold more than 9 package store licenses in the entire state or more than 2 in any city.
All right.
Oh, sorry, 2 more questions. Deshauna, name of the mobile license again is a 12C caterer's license. And those come directly from the ABCC, which is the state agency, a 12C caterer's license. And Tony Jones asks, will the board actually view the lease after a letter of intent? Yes, the board and the ABCC both will will require the lease after the LOI. And Wendy Guerrero is asking, do we need to specify which license we need? No, in fact, it's all one application. There's only one application for a new liquor license. So you apply for a license, and then the board in its deliberation will determine kind of which license you are eligible for, because there are many types of licenses you may be eligible for that you're not even aware of. There are licenses from earlier special legislation from 2014 and 2006 that you may be eligible for but might not know about. So the board in its deliberation will determine which type of license you are eligible for and will receive.
All right. If I have a beer, wine, cordial license, can I apply for a full license?
You can. It's a new license application. So the board will have the exact same public need questions and analysis as it will for any new license. But yes, you certainly can apply. Many folks already have applied to do exactly that. And the board will deliberate and determine if that is in the public need.
With intent to sign lease, if we apply and then are approved multiple months later and space has been rented for lack of time, will we be given time to find a new space?
Right, that would be a new application at that point. If you lose the space in the meantime, it does mean it's a new application because your application is tied to a specific premise. You kind of need to start over. It would probably also be a whole new community process because you'd be in a different neighborhood. So yeah, if you lose access to the space, you'd start over with a new application at your new space.
If we have a temporary space, can we apply for a license for the temp space and apply for our future permanent home entity? Which I'm assuming means applying for both.
So that's a tricky question, right? If we are talking about one of the non-transferable licenses, that license would have to return back to the city if you're moving, right? The non-transferable licenses are tied to an entity and a premise and a location. Oh, same space. I'm not sure I know what that means. You might want to reach out to us directly, Kai, so we can talk about this. Happy to try to answer this more, but I'm not quite sure I understand the question at this point.
Okay.
She might
Is there
be
a
talking
statute?
about special one-day licenses, like applying for those. But we're happy to talk to you about this and walk you through the process.
Yep.
Okay. Is there a statute of limitation on a criminal conviction to be eligible?
Right. So again, the only type of conviction that is a complete prohibition against a liquor license is a narcotics conviction. If you have a narcotics conviction, there is no statute of limitations. You are barred forever from being part of a liquor license application. Any other category of criminal conviction, there's no statute of limitations. You're not even prohibited from holding a liquor license. You do need to disclose it. You need to include an affidavit with your application explaining your criminal history and basically any mitigating or remedial measures that you would like the board to take into account, the board and the ABCC.
I'm assuming can liquor license check the status of your application? Am I reading that right?
I'm not sure. Does that mean landlord maybe?
Oh, can the landlord? I'm assuming.
So the applications themselves, anything that comes through city channels would be public record. So anybody could file a public record request and check on the status of an application at any time. That would include a landlord. So
Okay.
short answer, yes.
Sorry about that, Tony. I've been calling liquor license LL. If my organization owns a building and we plan on renting to another company, can we be the one to complete the application or will the company have to complete it?
Complicated question that, again, there's some nuance around it we might want to talk about, but again, short answer is either. This is kind of a business decision on your end. So if you are the kind of landlord and want to hold that license and retain ultimate control over it, you certainly can do so and bring on an operator under what is called a management agreement. That essentially means that while you are the licensee and you're ultimately responsible, you're bringing in another entity under you to run the food and beverage program. That can happen. You'll want a well-drafted management agreement that protects your interest and the management entity's interest as well. Or alternatively, you could just be the landlord, lease the space to the company actually running the business, and they can apply for the license on their own under a lease with you. So either is permissible. Both do happen. Management agreements are a little complicated, so a lot of folks shy away from them, but it is a way to do the thing that you're asking. So again, might want to talk offline about that, but short answer is either way can work.
Okay. What community has the most alcohol licenses?
I mean, it's it's probably where it's, North End, downtown, Back Bay, Seaport. Those are probably the highest. I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but all data on all of our liquor licenses is available on the Analyze Boston portal. So you can actually look for yourself at every single liquor license in the city. It's downloadable as a CSV file. So if you want to nerd out and sort it by neighborhood or by zip code, you're certainly welcome to do that.
So we do have two individuals asking if you have a sealed query or a sealed criminal record, are you supposed to disclose it?
Yes. A sealed record is not the same thing as an expunged record. If your record is expunged, that means it doesn't exist. There is no record to disclose. If your records are sealed, you should still, the question does not ask, do you have a criminal record? The question on the form asks, have you ever been convicted of a state, federal, or military crime? Even if your record is sealed, you have been convicted. You would disclose it, but in that affidavit that you submit with your application, you should write, my records have been sealed, and then go from there. But yes, you do still have to disclose.
The elaboration is even if dealing with marijuana, which yes.
Yes, if you have been convicted of a state, federal, or military crime, you do still need to check the box. Yes, if it's been sealed, great, but you should write in your affidavit, record has been sealed.
All right.
Good questions.
Does anyone else have any other questions? And again, I'll go back to office hours if anyone has an interest in those.
I just dropped into the chat for everybody the general email address for our office, my personal email address, and also the phone number. Oh, that is my personal phone number. I didn't really mean to do that. I meant to give our office number, but hang on, let me substitute that with. There we go. That is the phone number for our office, and you can make sure that you are connected with anybody who is able to answer your specific question. We do want to be accessible and help folks through what is a not always most straightforward process.
All right, and I will go ahead and reshare my information for anyone interested. Again, all slides will be sent to the email address that you registered with. If you do have a different email address that you would like me to send them to, feel free to reach out or shoot me an email and I will get that done. I saw some people asking about the slides being translated in Spanish. I can absolutely accommodate that as well. If you do have a different language you are interested in or know someone that could benefit from it, please reach out and I will be happy to assist with that also. Right. Well, if we have no other questions, I will give everyone their time back. Thank you, Danny, Kathleen, and Carolina so much for all of your help with this and for all of your knowledge and wisdom on this topic. Hope everyone's excited as me. All right, take care.
Thanks, everybody.